going back to the low end and the control of it, you see the two molts. So you can do it so many different ways. You can add harmonics, you can add mid-range by creating another molt and isolating that frequency that you want to add, so on and so forth. But here's the example of, think about it. You have a kick, low end, you have an 808, extreme low end, and then you have a bass line. How do you make them all work together? I mean, we've all had that problem a million fucking times. Nothing's getting in the way with each other, because here's your low end, the solid low end. Here's your sidechain compression. And you're like, what are you sidechaining? Sorry. Here's your bass line. Here's what's feeding the sidechain. And I always like, and this is very important, you should write this down. A lot of people will put an aux on it and feed the sidechain. I like to do it with the track because I can slide it to wherever I want. I can have it react later, or I can have it react sooner, which I normally do. I usually have it react 2 samples before it's supposed to, so it can open up and shut that whatever frequency I'm trying to take out sooner instead of waiting behind the beat and you hear that.
So you're not sending it?
No, not sending it. I'm just duplicating it, and as you can see,
like just dedicating an output.
Yeah, so I don't know what you guys use for your sidechain, but I tend to use this because I can sidechain the exact frequency that I want out. You're over here, you know, you pick which one. And obviously, this bus is feeding that. And then you'll see exactly every time it hits, it takes out that low end frequency. And I'll explain to you why I do that. Think about it. A lot of people used to do this. Oh, here comes that bass line that's playing on the 808. I want it to cut through in here, but every time it plays, what happens? The speakers fart and it's too much low end energy. So they'll roll all that off. And then when you're playing it, it sounds great when it's playing with the 808 or the low end. But when it's by itself, now you got a thin ass 808. So now when that 808 isn't playing, it comes back to its original self. So look, here's it without being dipped. But then if I gate it, crazy noticeable, right? Let me take this off. Here's the bass. And then you listen to this bass. You got a little bit of that, right? So you want to keep the low end on that, but now it only takes away when the 808's playing and you don't hear the dip. You have that consistent low end energy. And why that's so important is if you had these both having that energy surge at that level, your voltage raises up, right? So you can't go as loud. So this technique gives me about 1.5 dB. You hear a dip? No. So every time the low end is needed on this, it's there. When that comes in, it dips it out. And once again, what do we don't do? Here's the mid-range. We don't dip that out. So your ear hears that continuously, and it says, oh, the bass is right there. And when the low end comes, you don't feel the dip because you're getting that low end energy from that other bass line. And we'll go over that in more detail.
Is that like a super common thing that you do in pretty much all the hip hop stuff?
It depends upon the technique that you need to use. Sometimes it's just a kick and 808, and that's the easiest. Every time the...
You said you'll trim it.
Yes, every time the kick will hit. If this didn't have multiple low-end signals going through it, and I didn't have to worry about it, everybody sees the kick, right? It would have looked like this. Hold on. So now that initial jolt that's getting fed to my compressor and my parallel compression as well as harmonics, it's not hitting at the same time. And you're saying to yourself, well, are you gonna hear that envelope? No, because that low end energy and that signal that you're hearing is occupied by the kick. You ever had a dope sounding kick and then when you add the 808, now you're distorting? So you gotta bring everything down lower? Now you don't. Here's just the kick. The kick in the 808 with the envelope real quick. So you just hear this. You didn't hear a dip, right?
No.
But I just saved about 2 dB of headroom because now I'm not hitting this so hard. But put everything in. Here's the rough. You see how loud they fucking are? Like super, super loud. So you're having, you know, whatever limiter and compressor they're using, fucking struggling, crying for help. And then you come over here, you're like, what the fuck happened? You're actually louder and you can hear everything and your speakers are not blowing up. And it's easy to learn that gain structure. It's super, super simple. It's harder to make it your own, which is really, really important. But to learn the technique, the starting point, you'll be like, oh shit, the fuck was I thinking? What's the first thing that leaves when you compress and limit it? Transients, right? And low end. First two things. The loudest things are the first things to go. So what do? I created these 4 auxes. These are my drum auxes. Transformer 1, transformer 2, subwoofer, louder, and low air. I have everything that gets taken away when I try to go loud, even though I have the proper gain structure, to add back in. Transformer 1, obviously a little bit of distortion and harmonics. Everyone knows the decapitator. One thing you'll realize is I have it on the Dr. Dre preset. So Dr. Dre, on his actual, how he got his kicks and mixes so loud, is he would push into his stereo bus compressor. On the G, it's called cross-eyed, where your attack is 30, release is 1. Don't worry, you'll have all this. And you set your threshold.
Makeup down, like -5.
I always start there, could be because you're adding it back in. And usually if you start at 0, it's always a little bit too loud. So I like starting below whatever, but it's just a starting point. But I learned this from Dave when we used to parallel the 160X into the Pultec to add that parallel compression on drums, specifically the kick. So our old kick chain used to be the 160X into the Pultec, split it between 30 and 60 cycles, and add that back into the kick. So now you have a controlled low end, because think about it, there's no transient anymore. It's just a real quick. So you don't have your speakers farting or exploding. And then on our snares, we had the 160X to his favorite EQ, the API 550. And that would give you the crack added back in. And that's the Bob Powers technique. That's where we got it from. You have that compression, Dr. Dre style. Add a little bit more harmonic distortion. So this really helps you obviously you can see the mix at 45%, so you can add the original sound back in or the original transient with the distortion. But more importantly, you can push the drive and really add whatever, amount that you wanted to add. And that helps you identify, remember, distortion is your friend. That helps you identify loudness. Sometimes when the transient's taken away and you don't have this, it sounds lower and lifeless. So sometimes I need it, sometimes I don't. But obviously you see it there and it's ready to go at a drop of a dime. I don't have to wait during the time, it needs a transient. Let me go to this, find the transformer. I want it immediately. Just have it ready. Boom. Done. All this. So here you go. My drum aux. This is going to all drums, and the original signal and whatever I add in, because that's part of gain staging. You always want to have a safety net, because what happens when I got the drums banging and you have everything going your C drums, but you have your bass line here and you have your high, whatever going to all the drums, but you're like, 20 hertz is killing me. I want to take it out of everyone. Are you going to go to each individual one? Now you have another safety net. And then you're like, oh man, I can actually make it even louder and parallel this one. Parallel everything, not just the kick. You have the opportunity to parallel just the drums, opportunity just to parallel the 808, but then you have an opportunity to parallel or manipulate all of them together. And I'll show you the example of that with the Transformer 2. So this was what I finally had to create. It's not there yet. I found another trick, which I told you guys about, the Soft Clipper SIR, which is helping me even more. But this was called my Fruity Loop aux. So this gave me that Fruity Loop distortion that everyone so desperately loved, but it only gave it to what I wanted to go to. Because obviously you can just put it on the overall drums, which I never do, or just put it on the kick, which I actually did on this record. So here's the kick width. Do you hear that top part of the transient? Let me take it out. Obviously, this is Ed Sheeran, so you can't go super, super crazy. If this was, anything Mike Will did or anything Boy Wonder did, whoever's on Fruity Loops, you can go. It's the same kick drum. All you're doing is adding that harmonic distortion on that top end, and it brings it forward. So that's, once again, frequencies telling you where it's at in the mix. Look how much it's compressed. So you're not at all affecting the voltage going to anything, because it's being squashed. So you're only letting that initial transient in. another cool thing is to mute this.
I got a question for you. Excuse my ignorance because I like mixing Ableton and stuff.
No, for
but
sure.
Like with this, are you going from Transformer 1 into Transformer 2?
No. So I never put, these are my go-tos, and I never use Transformer 2 unless it's needed, so it's not
I see. Okay.
open.
Okay.
But these are all individual ones by themselves. So
Okay.
as you can see, Transformer goes to Transformer 2 goes to Transformer 2, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And then all these with the original signal goes to all drums so I can manipulate everything. So let's listen to it without the original signal. We're just listening to what I'm adding. So then I can go even more, and then you can get super, super aggressive, obviously. You can find the key. You feel what I'm saying? I'm putting a transient in key. Why does this feel so good? Because nothing's fighting you. You know, we've all listened to the radio, right? And then the record comes on, and the DJ's like, oh, we need to speed it up. Sounds great because you're dancing to it faster. But if you're like us, it's like, does you know it's in between keys? You know what I mean? It drives me crazy. So now, fortunately enough, Old School Jay was convinced by my Duke graduate assistant, why do you still use the Q original? I'm like, why? Well, it's great. I can make it dance. He's like, well, let me introduce you to something else. And see, now, you know, it's just boom, pick the key. And then you can really make this dance because this is something that Dave, you know, this is for the upper echelon. I have, how many degrees do you have, D? 3 degrees. You can manipulate, which I've never had the opportunity before, but we love this EQ. It's called tilting, which is amazing, but you would have to use the plugin, you know, the tilt plugin, but now this thing has everything. And then the other game changer was dynamic EQing, which, think about it. I want to EQ something, but I only want to EQ it when it's needed. Could you imagine automating something fucking the whole time when you wanted to go off and on, and actually you will hear it turning off and on when you bypass it because you hear that clicking if it's turning it off during the sound. But now, let's bring it to the kick, so it's just, so you come here, oh, this kick is too subby. You just come over here, click that, click this, turn it from an EQ to a dynamic EQ. Now, put the gain back. This is what you want down. It can be a part of the harmonics that's playing a bad note that you don't like or appreciate, and it just goes. Instead of a constant taken away. And then obviously you can get surgical with the band, so you can just notch out a frequency, like he's saying, and you can sidechain it every time the snare hits. You want to take that frequency out, you can do it via dynamic EQ. I'm usually pretty loud and don't have to use this. I used to use this a lot when I didn't have the black box, but sometimes I manipulate the black box and this when I want to go ignorant. And all it is a basic low-level enhancer. So you're squashing the shit out of the transients, your high level, the thing that hits first, bye-bye. And then the second thing is your low level. So basically that parallel signal, and you can put it as much as you want into the sound. And you can see how it works just by doing this. So you see the lift that it kind of gives it? You can overly do it, but you really can't tell as much because the mother of all parallel compression and harmonics is doing most of the lifting. But I used to use that a lot. So basically just paralleling your drums. And the last but not least is the low air. I use this a lot when the bass line disappears. You have a kick, and Dave used to do this with a sine wave. He would get the oscillator, find the key, and then gate the oscillator to give him that low end.
You ran it into a channel, and the line trim, you crank it until you got the kind of distortion you wanted.
Going back to the low air, so there's no section in the song, but imagine if this kick continued. When the 808 disappear, obviously I'm losing that roundness, that low end that the 808's giving. I always add it back in with a low air, and you can pick the frequency that you want to add back in. So that kick doesn't sound weak. Like it sounds punchy, big and thick when the 808's playing, because that 808's taking up like 80 hertz and below. But when it disappears, what do? To me, the key is finding that perfect balance of what that mix needs frequency-wise. So you're like, oh my God, this part of the song sounds amazing, so I need to continue that all the way through.
So would you automate that in when the 808 comes out?
Yeah, every time the 808 comes out, I just put the low air on the kick and automate it when the kick comes in. And then you can, like he said, manipulate it. You can be low end distorted. It can be out of phase, whatever you want to do. A psychoacoustic thing we'll talk about is the R-Bass, another vintage plugin that no one's been able to replicate, but we'll go over that later. And that's what gives a lot of these pop guys the psychoacoustic low end, the upper harmonics that feel like bass, so they can raise the volume of the record. You can have the most banginest 20 or 30 hertz. If you can't hear it and it's taking up room with voltage, you're losing. So how do I keep that low end energy without wasting a frequency that I can't even hear? And the R-Bass is the key with that. We'll go over that later. So we went over all the auxes, the 4 auxes, louder and low air. So I started with 1. I'm like, this sounds like shit. That sounds like 2. And I kept going and going till I got to, I damn near wanted to add even more to see what it sounded like, right? And what it also gives you with the combination, because it's emulated by waves and they appreciate the defects that a console gives you, and obviously it's that noise floor. So all of them together gives you that white noise. If you play it or solo it by itself, or if you just listen to it by itself, it might sound annoying, but in the mix you don't hear it, and it helps you with any reverb tails. It's basically your backup dither.
You gate it to...
No, yeah, I gate it. So, and I put a really, I don't even know why I used to have 2 gates, maybe because I was super afraid, but I put a little EQ before the compression. But I put it on a second release and a second hold, so you never want it to be quick. It's just all the way through, but when the drums don't play, it's not a miscellaneous shh, because I got shh going on every track.
All those NLSs are the same, exactly.
No. And that's another thing. I don't know why he randomly chose which one he chose. Like, I don't fucking know, but the fucking order of them changed. Like, I spent years trying to fucking prove that this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. I called the guy and I was just like, yo, my man, like, you fucking really reinvented what we as engineers look for when we're driving a 4K. Like, I'll give you an example. When he first came to Larrabee, and I was fucking being his ninja, trying to get into his room and befriending his assistant, I knew Manny was on a K. I knew a lot of people were working on a K. I didn't know the real true difference until I really started studying, and we got maybe 6 months into our relationship, but they had him on a J. And the one thing that was going around town, because engineers talk, is a J falls apart when you push it too hard. And he's really, really aggressive with his mixes. The reason why everyone loves the G, especially rock guys, the harder you push it, the more character it gives you. It doesn't fall apart. The J falls apart. That's why they came out with the K, because they try to mirror the center section to the G. So this gives me my G. And the order, is so random.
Did he tell you how he came up with it? It's so random that he even came up with it.
I didn't even ask.
Okay.
I didn't even want to disrespect them. I just said, sometimes you just got to say thank you. You know what I mean?
All you're doing is trimming on there, trimming volume.
No, I'm not trimming anything. This is just the drive. It just starts at nominal, so 0. Yeah, that's the EMI emulation. That's Spike. That's the SSL. EMI. So this is the order. You guys will get it figured out. You might want to try it.
Just on the
master, just on the drums. Yeah. I mean, no, not just on the drums. On anything low end for me. Like I said, the best compliment I ever got was from Pharrell. I chose you because you add weight to my mixes like no one can. And this is a huge proponent, because I put this on sometimes going through the board. Not sometimes, most of the time.
Did you try it on other stuff than the low end?
It probably will give you the girth and width for a guitar, but I like variables. I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. I like everything to have its own flavor. So I do get harmonics on basically every track. Here's one example. Obviously it has the drive, the RC20. Super dope plugin. But my go-to usually, if I didn't choose that, 9 times out of 10, you will see it every time, is this bad boy, the little radiator. The harder you push the heat, the more drive, the more harmonics. It's absolutely amazing. The reason why they came up with heat is because they try to emulate, what the board gives you on every channel. This is you notice it super, super quick. And it helps me, if the best way I can put it, undigitize everything. This is a really, really good plugin.
Where are you putting your heat settings at?
Oh, that's a good question. My sweet spot, remember you got the drive, odd, even. I'm going 2 clicks to the left, 2 clicks to the right. And that's been my setting. Now, the key to victory is when I first started, I had it on the vocals and it was too much. You know what I mean? So I never put it on the vocals. It's only on the instruments. And I put it just like a preamp on a board, your plugins. So you tap the P,
Effects as well.
unbypass, no. Anything to do with the vocals, as you can see, crispy clean. You know, this is just a broad, you can't manipulate it. So it just goes over everything. But for me, when I want to add those harmonics to certain instruments, I want to be able to have a personality and do it 100% relaxed on my own and not have to worry about anything because I can manipulate it myself.
Is there a reason you choose to use master channels rather than just aux?
Well, yeah, master channels are in gain staging completely needed. So say for instance, yes, definitely it is a VCA. So say for instance, you're sending everything to, you can easily see it with drums more than anything else. You're sending everything to your, I'm hitting it too hard. You don't have to worry about fucking turning each individual down. You just turn what's going to these plugins, which is the master. That's the key with gain staging that we're gonna learn is the more safety nets you have, the louder you can achieve because you're always protecting yourself. The next one is the R-Bass. This one was shown to me by John Marie. John Marie takes this shit to 0. He's all upper harmonics. He mixed on an Oratone. So this is giving you the upper harmonics. It's psychoacoustic. So basically you set your crossover. My default is 80. The drums are super, super thin, then I'll take it lower.
Does that mean everything below 80 is what it's being?
No, everything above 80 is being added.
Okay.
So your upper harmonics, and the difference is monumental. And by the way, these are the exact EQs that I run my drums through.
Just the drums, that's all?
Percussive, so drums, bass. Not the high-end percussives though, the low-end percussive. Remember this, with the R-Bass, with your compressor, so this is harmonics to make you obviously be more effective in smaller speakers. Compressor, gate to get rid of that noise. Obviously we are at 1 because we don't want it to keep going. Your multiband, not your multiband, your parallel compression and your harmonics, even and odd. Obviously I'm left heavy. And your EQ after everything is done. I love the Shadow Hills compressor. It's a game changer.
Are you using both sides or just the opto?
Just the optical. And I don't make it work too much. Sometimes when you want to get that Fruity Loop sound, I'll push into it 3 to 4 dB, but you can see it's just barely kissing and you'll have this exact preset and you don't have to worry. And that's harmonics. You know what I mean? That's the tube circuitry giving you that body, that warmth, but more importantly, I'm only taking a dB off of compression, but yet it's still raising the level of it. And if we had an analyzer, you would see the meters not jump too much. Now this is going to be the most notable thing ever. Now think about it. It's just one plugin. If we had meters, it would be hitting in my gain staging. I like my drums from the beginning to be about -5. But think about it, you're staying at the same voltage level, but it's a game changer. It literally gives you about 3 to 4 dB more without raising your level at all. So you got your odd and even harmonics. Saturation is key. Saturating your drum is what's going to give you that inherent loudness without raging. So this is not a volume. This is not any gain. I'm actually taking away some gain, but I'm adding a whole bunch of paralleled, even and odd harmonics. And the greatest thing about it is when you put the air on, that's the transient release, and you can make up as much as you want. It's a beautiful plugin, man.
What does pento mean?
Even harmonics.
Even okay.
Yeah, even and odd.
Even harmonics tend to give you a more musical sound. An odd harmonic will give you a ninth.
But distinguishable.
Yeah.
So that's what gives
They
you.
both have uses. It's little bitty bites, each thing, but they're just honed in on something musical.
And as part of gain staging, the transient's being released, right? So the transients is your first initial peak. So that's what's going to set off your compressor, set off everything. But I'm releasing that through. So if you looked at your meters, that transient's still going to go through, so you're going to still be at -5, right? But look at the difference between nothing on it. Transients are still there. Your voltage stays the same. Now you're running your drums through this shit and you set your gain stage. As long as you keep your gain stage at that level, at that starting point, obviously you got to adjust between every record. You just jumped up 5 dB on your drums. It's life-changing.